I want to start by just sharing my own story, because most of the things what I'm gonna talk about is just the way the Spirit led me personally, and uh, and we are in a small setting here which allows to always interact somehow, so you can jump in whenever you want to. I try to prepare like a real series of teachings which I would be able to give, but I feel more like uh, getting into discourse, so you're always free to answer, to ask something. So as Robin mentioned, my name is Johannes. I'm 31, and actually right now I'm leading the House of Prayer in Augsburg, Germany. Before that, I was studying and I was working at the university as a theologian. So I hold a PhD in dogmatics. So this is where I was trained, where I was coming from. When in 2003 and 4, the Lord started to just placing it on my wife's and my heart to build something, like a house of prayer in Germany. So right now we started doing this full time in 2006. So since then, my family and I were living to build up the house of prayer. Right now, we have 21 full timers in Augsburg, south of Germany, and some 35 part timers or voluntary staff members, covering some 100 hours or so per week. So this is where we're standing. We do things like IMI for ourselves once a year or so. We're preparing to host a conference now in January. I do a lot of traveling, even with House of Prayers all across Europe. And but now I wanna tell you about my first years when I met the Lord. Yesterday was November 8th, and yesterday, November 8th, is actually the day where I gave my life to Jesus. So I celebrate my birthday every year, and this was 17 years ago. So I came out of I would say, um, normal teenage years, which was back then I was part of like a hippie culture. So I would start pretty early with everything like drinking and smoking, things like that. I didn't go totally deep like into drugs and things like that, just a little bit, but it was what you would call a normal worldly life. And I was really encountered in a totally strong way by God at a conference where actually my parents forced me to go there. So I was there and was totally bored. And it's a story like I personally, it's very hard for me to doubt ever that God exists, because I was encountered by him personally. I didn't want to convert. I wasn't looking for God, nothing like that. I wasn't depressive. I wasn't on drugs, nothing like that. I was okay with myself, and I was in this conference, and I saw all these crazy Christians, and they offered to pray for me. And I said, okay, you can pray for me. It was like the last evening of the conference, and most of the time I was outside of the meeting because it was so boring. We were playing frisbee and it was just the last evening. It was like they said it's a Holy Spirit evening, and so there were two guys, or there was one guy who prayed for me, and I just got I got hit by the Spirit. I never heard anything about the Holy Spirit, actually. I mean, heard about him, but I just encountered the love, I encountered the power and the peace and the joy which I have never felt before, and I just said like, this must be the Holy Spirit. I don't know what it is, but it's so good. I want to spend the rest of my life in pursuit of this reality. But now the funny thing is, nobody told me that I need to give my life to Jesus, or convert or change my way of living. I never heard that. I just knew like, okay, I need this God. I need this Holy Spirit. So I went back to my school with my friends, and I did everything just the same as before. So smoking and lying to my parents, and I wondered why this joy was gone within some days. And I was like, I just wonder how I can get back to this reality. And it was a half year later, actually, in November 8th, where somebody just told me that you need to give your life to Jesus. I said, oh, well, that's a good idea. So I did this, and I made like a contract with God. I said, okay, God, I give you my life. It's a total capitulation. You can have all of it, but I want to have your spirit all the time. Okay, this is like the deal. So really nobody told me that this was possible, but I just wrote it in my diary, and this is how my life with God started. And I'm very happy that I didn't get into contact with other Christians too early, because they would have blocked my zeal. They would have slowed me down because I was so hungry for God. Nobody told me, but I would start, the first book of the Bible I read was, of course, Revelation. And I loved it. I didn't understand anything. It was like, okay, Babel and the Antichrist. I just loved it. I started to tell my friends about it. I didn't understand anything. This is all cool. And so we're sitting together like, it's really true. 1.5 months after my conversion, I was 15 or so. I was sitting together with other friends of mine who were not Christians, and we were reading the book of Revelation. Like, oh, this is interesting. Wow, that's gross. What does this mean? I don't know, but it's cool. So kept on reading things like that. And actually the first Christian book I happened to buy for myself was Passion for Jesus by Mike Bickle. I said, oh, Passion for Jesus, that sounds good. So I started to devour it. And I got in contact with some of the Christian mystics of old, which some persons which I'm going to tell you about as well, like John of the Cross and Teresa of Avila, like stuff you would normally have in your university. I just found it somewhere in a bookshelf or so, and I started to read it, and I was totally captivated by it. I was totally fascinated, and I started to consider it normal, of course, to pray 2 hours a day, because nobody told me that no Christians do that, or that this is crazy, or to fast or read the Bible. So I would start, like, as a teenager, I would start to read 10 or 20 chapters of Bible per day, because I was so hungry. And I would pray for hours. And the funny thing happened that the youth group, which I was part of, I got too radical for them, and so they threw me out. It's really true. And at one certain point of time, I had lost all my friends at school, because I would run around with my Jesus t-shirts and big wooden crosses. I was really fanatic. I was really crazy. So 1 year after my conversion, I had lost all my friends, and pretty soon after that, I was kicked out of my youth group. So this was an interesting situation, because I always thought I'm an evangelist, because I'm an outgoing personality. I thought I want to go in the streets and tell everybody, and actually I did. But then I had no place anymore, and even I led worship, but I had no group anymore where I could lead worship. I had nowhere where I could preach, and had lost, nobody was interested to talk to me anymore in my class. So I was forced into a hidden life. And this is what I, looking back, consider as being the most precious years of my life. So I want to talk to you about basically the 3 days, just about the hidden dimension of your own spiritual life, which is the source for everything else. And we always get it wrong. We start with the external reality, and at the end we're so burned out, or we have a year off. We say, oh, now we could do some prayer or so. And no wonder we happen to have so little fruit. Because there is just the principle of John 15. You remain in me, and you will bear much fruit. And apart from me, you just can do nothing. And I was forced to learn this. I did not learn this like voluntarily. But I was 17 or I was 16. I was full of passion for Jesus. I had no group to live it out in the midst of it. So I think, it's really true. I believe that God was calling me to be a hermit. You know what a hermit is? Up there in the mountains, you have in the Orthodox tradition or in the Catholic tradition as well, these monks who live celebratory lifestyles, so they're not married. So they are somewhere up in the mountain, and they are not feeding the poor, not writing books, nothing, just praying. I have met many of those. They are still existing today, like in Greece or Mount Athos or something like that. I've talked to many of those. It's fascinating. But when I was 16 or 17, I was totally sure that I was called to live a lifestyle like that. And this is why I was not interested in going to parties or meeting girlfriends, because I really believed that I had a celebratory vocation. So called to be a monk or a priest or something like that. And so I thought, like, okay, how could I prepare for this lifestyle? Well, I would come home from my school and I would pray. actually, it wasn't quite enough in my home, so we had a monastery. The place where I went to school was a Catholic monastery, and it wasn't a very, let's say, like, not very radical Christians. It was just normal monastery. But they had a small chapel which was very quiet inside of the monastery. And at times they allowed me to just pray there, and it was a sacred place for me. It was a hidden place. But it's really, it sounds like a crazy story, but it's true. But I was so hungry for God that I couldn't stay within these hours they allowed me to keep in there. So I broke in the monastery every now and then. They had like yeah, they had like how you call it, some, some fences, but I could climb over that, just behind it, nobody watching me, and running there and just spend hours in this chapel. And in these years where I thought, okay, this is my life, I really, really learned a lesson which I forget so often today. And the lesson is that He alone is enough. He alone is enough. I mean, we sing it 1,000 times. Jesus, you're everything to me. But we learn it in the hard times. Yeah, we learn it when all the other things that we build up for ourselves, if they burn, and you happen to see that those walls don't stand, or those houses, they are starting to shake. So the hidden place was where David got his walk with God. I mean, Psalm 27, one thing have I desired, David didn't learn it when he was king somewhere, in Jerusalem. He learned it in the hidden years in Bethlehem, when nobody knew him, where his family despised him, where he was just a nobody in nowhere's will. Back up there.